Imagine you are the most powerful man in the Middle East. You have a $2 trillion oil empire, a military pact with the United States, American fighter jets parked on your soil, and American soldiers sleeping inside your borders. Now imagine that the country your own American allies just bombed, the country whose missiles are currently hitting your airports, your oil refineries, and your capital city, is the same country you secretly called on the phone 2 months ago and promised to protect. That is not a hypothetical. That is exactly what happened. And the story of why Saudi Arabia played both sides of the most dangerous conflict of the 21st century is one of the most extraordinary acts of geopolitical survival you will ever hear. By the end of this video, you will understand not just what Saudi Arabia did, but why every single decision they made was the only logical choice for a kingdom that is one wrong move away from either becoming the most powerful nation in the Middle East or the most devastated one. Stay with me, because the final revelation is going to completely change how you see this entire war. Let us go back to January of 2026, because that is where the secret begins. At that point, the entire world knew that the United States, under President Donald Trump, was building towards something massive with Iran. 2 aircraft carrier groups were already positioned in the region, diplomatic back channels had broken down, and inside the Trump White House, a decision was being shaped that would launch the most expensive military operation in decades. What almost nobody knew at the time was that Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman was making 2 completely contradictory moves at the exact same moment. On one hand, according to the Washington Post, Mohammed bin Salman was personally conducting multiple phone calls with President Trump, urging him to attack Iran, telling him that Iran would become stronger and more dangerous if Washington did not strike immediately. He was pushing the United States toward war. But on the other hand, on January 28, 2026, in a direct phone call with Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, Mohammed bin Salman made a public declaration that Saudi Arabia would not allow its airspace or territory to be used in any attack on Iran. He called on both sides to resolve their issues through diplomacy and said Saudi Arabia would respect Iranian sovereignty. Think about what just happened. The same man told America to go to war with Iran while simultaneously telling Iran that Saudi Arabia would keep its skies closed to American jets. He was arming the shooter while hiding the target. The UAE did the same thing within 24 hours, with their foreign ministry declaring that no Emirati territory would serve as a staging ground for hostile military actions against Iran. These are countries with American military bases on their soil. These are countries that have security agreements going back decades with Washington. And they told the United States, publicly and without apology, that this war was not theirs to fight. For most of history, the Gulf states were passive actors who sheltered under the American umbrella and let Washington make the decisions. What you just witnessed was something fundamentally different. This was the Gulf states drawing their own red lines for the first time in modern history. And the reason they did it is rooted in a calculation so sophisticated that most Western analysts completely missed it. Here is what Saudi Arabia understood that Washington did not. Iran, at its absolute worst, cornered, bombed, and existentially threatened, is still right next door. The United States is 6,000 miles away. When American bombers fly home after Operation Epic Fury concludes, Saudi Arabia is still going to wake up the next morning with Iran as a neighbor. So every decision Riyadh made was filtered through a single question: what does our world look like the day after this war ends, regardless of who wins? The answer to that question drove everything. Since 2023, Saudi Arabia and Iran had been carefully rebuilding their relationship through Chinese brokered diplomacy. By 2025, they had agreed on Hajj pilgrim quotas, direct flights, consular services, and technical cooperation frameworks. Saudi Arabia had invested enormous political capital in making Iran feel that it was not surrounded, that the Gulf was not a staging ground for its destruction. That investment, as one Saudi insider told the Christian Science Monitor, was enormous, and it was about to be tested in the most brutal possible way. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury and Operation Roaring Lion simultaneously. Joint strikes hit Tehran, Isfahan, Qom, Karaj, and Kermanshah. Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was killed. Multiple Iranian military and government sites were destroyed. Within hours, Iran activated every retaliatory mechanism it had built over 3 decades of asymmetric warfare. And here is where the story shifts from geopolitics into something that starts to look like the opening scenes of a genuine global catastrophe. Iran did not just strike Israel and American bases, Iran struck everywhere. According to CENTCOM figures, in the first 4 days alone, Iran launched 500 ballistic missiles and 2,000 drones at targets across 9 different countries. Bahrain, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates were all hit. The U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain came under attack. Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, Al Dhafra in the UAE, and Ali Al Salam in Kuwait were all targeted. And then Iran did something that sent a shockwave through every energy trading floor on the planet. A senior IRGC commander, an advisor to the Revolutionary Guard leadership, went on record with the most economically terrifying statement of the 21st century. He declared that the Strait of Hormuz was closed and that any ship attempting to pass through it would be set on fire. He said no oil would leave the area. The Strait of Hormuz is a waterway so narrow that in certain sections, tankers traveling in opposite directions can almost see each other's crews. And through that narrow strip of water flows approximately 20% of all oil traded anywhere on Earth, every single day. When that IRGC commander said those words, Brent crude began a vertical climb from $70 a barrel toward $80 and beyond. Financial markets from New York to Tokyo started pricing in a scenario that economists had long described as theoretically catastrophic, but practically unthinkable. It was now neither theoretical nor unthinkable. It was real time. The economic shock moved faster than the missiles did. Amazon placed notices on the top of its marketplace pages in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, the UAE, and Israel, warning customers of extended delivery times as regional operations were disrupted. Amazon's cloud data centers in the UAE and Bahrain began experiencing prolonged power outages. International air travel across the Middle East collapsed virtually overnight as country after country closed their airspace. The U.S. State Department issued urgent departure warnings for more than a dozen countries simultaneously, telling American citizens to leave Bahrain, Egypt, Iran, Iraq, Israel, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Syria, the UAE, and Yemen. Not one or two countries, 14 countries at once. And here is the financial angle that most news coverage completely buried. Lockheed Martin, the American defense contractor that manufactures the THAAD missile defense system, and the Patriot interceptor missiles being used to shoot down Iranian drones across the Gulf, had already seen its stock price climb nearly 40% since the beginning of 2026 as tensions escalated. The moment the war began, RTX, formerly Raytheon, saw a 4.7% single-day jump. Every Iranian missile that was intercepted represented millions of dollars in defense contractor revenue. In a conflict where Iran launched 1,800 missiles and drones into Gulf airspace in under 5 days, and where each Patriot interceptor costs $4 million with multiple missiles sometimes used against a single target, the financial machinery of war was running at full speed in one direction, while the global economy was running at full speed in the opposite direction. Now, let us come back to Saudi Arabia, because this is where the story becomes almost impossible to believe. While Iran was firing missiles at Saudi airports, oil refineries, and the American embassy in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia was simultaneously being asked by the United States to open its airspace so that American jets could fly attack routes through Saudi skies toward Iranian targets. According to the Wall Street Journal, Saudi Arabia and the UAE both refused. They shared intelligence with the United States. They activated their own air defense systems and helped intercept incoming Iranian missiles. They condemned the attacks publicly and called them flagrant violations of their sovereignty. But they would not open their skies to American or Israeli strike aircraft. In the middle of a war where Iranian drones were hitting Saudi soil, Saudi Arabia still would not give America the airspace it needed to prosecute that war more effectively. The reason was stated clearly by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman himself, as reported by CNN. He closed Saudi airspace to American and Israeli attackers specifically because he had promised Iran he would, a promise made before the war started, a promise he kept even while Iranian missiles were landing inside his own borders. Now pause on that for a moment, because it reveals a strategic sophistication that is genuinely remarkable. Saudi Arabia's calculation was this: if we help America destroy Iran completely, we inherit a power vacuum next door that fills with chaos, with proxy militias, with a revanchist Iranian population that will never forgive us. Worse, a humiliated and destroyed Iran might eventually reconstitute under far more radical leadership than Khamenei ever represented. And if we become fully complicit in Iran's destruction, we lose every diplomatic relationship we have spent 3 years building with Beijing and Moscow, who are watching this conflict very carefully. We also guarantee that whatever comes next in Tehran sees us as an enemy forever. The Saudi calculation was not about saving Iran as a friend. It was about surviving whatever comes after Iran. There is a sentence buried in a Christian Science Monitor analysis that captures the entire Saudi position with devastating precision. People with knowledge of the situation said there is a sentiment inside Saudi Arabia right now that reads as follows: "We invested in Iran. We defended Iran enough for them not to do this." That sentence contains the tragedy at the heart of everything happening in the Gulf. Saudi Arabia spent years and enormous political capital building a detente with Tehran precisely to prevent this scenario. And Iran, the moment it was struck and felt it had nothing left to lose, fired missiles at the very country that had tried to protect it from American military pressure. The Ras Tanura oil refinery, one of the largest oil processing facilities on the planet, had shrapnel land inside its perimeter from intercepted drone debris. The U.S. Embassy in Riyadh was struck by 2 drones, causing a limited fire. Riyadh International Airport came under attack. Saudi Arabia had crossed what Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman reportedly described internally as 3 critical red lines, and he instructed his military to begin directly engaging Iranian forces. This is the moment the chessboard changed. Within 72 hours of this war starting, Gulf states went from being neutral parties pushing for diplomacy to active combatants defending their territory. Qatar became the first Arab state in modern history to shoot down an Iranian military aircraft, destroying 2 Iranian Su-24 bombers approaching its territory. The UAE confirmed intercepting over 1,000 Iranian missiles and drones. And Saudi Arabia, the kingdom that had promised Iran it would not become a weapon against it, was now turning its military toward Iranian targets. Anwar Gargash, a senior advisor to the UAE president and one of the chief architects of the Gulf-Iran rapprochement, posted publicly that the damage to that relationship extended far beyond this war. 3 years of careful diplomacy, of Hajj negotiations and technical cooperation and trust-building phone calls, was being destroyed in days by the same country all that diplomacy was designed to protect. And here is where we arrive, at the revelation this entire video has been building toward. Saudi Arabia did not secretly save Iran from the United States because it loves Iran. It saved Iran because it was trying to save itself from being trapped between 2 great powers in a war that neither of them cares whether Saudi Arabia survives. The United States needs Saudi oil during the conflict and wants Saudi intelligence cooperation. Iran, if it feels the entire Gulf is an extension of American military power, will treat every Saudi facility as a legitimate target. Saudi Arabia's only path to survival in this war was to signal credibly to Iran that it was not America's weapon, while simultaneously ensuring that if Iran crossed the line, the entire weight of Saudi military capability would come down on its forces. That is not a contradiction. That is a survival strategy of extraordinary sophistication executed by a 39-year-old crown prince who has spent years studying exactly this scenario. And the tragic irony is that Iran made that strategy impossible to sustain the moment it fired missiles at Riyadh. In trying to punish the Gulf states for hosting American bases, Iran converted the one major regional power that had spent years arguing for diplomatic engagement with Tehran into an active combatant. Saudi Arabia could not protect Iran from America's strikes, but Iran destroyed every reason Saudi Arabia had ever had for trying. The Strait of Hormuz remains the sword hanging over the global economy, 20% of the world's oil, global stock markets pricing in a prolonged conflict, oil prices climbing toward levels that will hit every household in America, Europe, and Asia within weeks, a defense contractor economy running at full speed, evacuation flights trying to navigate closed airspace. The question of who controls Iran next, what shape that country takes after this war ends, and whether the nuclear program that survived the June 2025 strikes has been finished or merely driven deeper underground. These are the questions that will define the next decade. Saudi Arabia's secret game of protecting Iran while pushing America to attack it was not treachery. It was the most rational act a kingdom surrounded by fire could possibly perform. The real question now is whether that calculation survives contact with the missiles already in the air. And the answer to that question will not come from Washington or Tehran. It will come from Riyadh. It always does.